So recently I played through IMF's story quest in Wuthering Waves, and aside from the depression, it left me with one interesting reminder. Wuthering Waves is set in a post-apocalyptic world. We don't get reminded of that fact often enough due to us mostly tackling new foes and challenges, in a world that seems to have things back in order with new societies and very pretty aesthetics. But it made me think about all the other games I talk about on this channel, like Arknights and the recent Arknights Enfield release, Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, and of course Wuthering Waves. One thing they all have in common is the apocalypse, both past and present. All of these games feature sprawling ruins from long-lost civilizations, legends from disasters and heroes of the past, and also visual reminders like broken down roads and monsters that are bearing the marks of the past. This popped a question into my head. What purpose does the apocalypse have in stories and worlds like these? So in this video we'll be going over the different kinds of world-ending events and time periods of these 4 games to kind of try and figure that out. Of course there are many more games in the same broad genre of gacha games that fit this apocalyptic vibe, such as Honkai Star Rail's Belobog or the world of the original Arknights, but I wanted to keep some kind of focus in the video by picking 4 games that I know I can yap about.
Countless Tidespawn emerged in my wake. I tried to drive them back, but
To start with the game that prompted me to make this video, the world and human civilizations of Wuthering Waves have, from the start, always been one constantly on the edge of a special kind of recurring collapse on Solaris 3, the Lament. While we still don't know the actual origin of the Lament, the ramifications of one are very clear to see. For over 10,000 years, the Lament has been essentially torturing the people of Solaris 3 in the form of major supernatural disasters and the appearance of so-called waveform phenomena. So far, 5 global laments and over 300,000 regional ones have been recorded by humanity, which kinda implies that many thousands more were left unrecorded, possibly due to the lack of survivors. The Lament itself can truly destabilize reality and the laws of physics. Things like warped terrains, time displacements, natural disasters, heavenly bodies falling from the sky. Anything and everything is possible when it comes to the Lament, and that's not even mentioning the immense psychological toll the Lament has on humans. It disrupts literally everything about the human psyche, inducing symptoms like despair, grief, trauma, hallucinations and the like during these apocalyptic events. During the last major global lament, I believe the lore isn't all too clear about that just yet, the supernatural and physics-breaking lament actually cut off Solaris 3 from the rest of the universe by means of the etheric sea, as was mostly revealed during IMF's quest. Long-range travel, interstellar exploration, humanity's biggest dream was kinda snuffed out by the Lament, leaving hundreds dead and destroyed space stations scattered in the ice fields of Lahai-Roi. But that's not even everything. The real horror of Wuthering Waves' almost continuous apocalypse is what the Lament leaves behind, the supernatural anomalies known as waveform phenomena. Aside from being the thing that causes a bunch of the effects of the Lament, like the messed up laws of physics and the shifting of terrain, it's the unique scars the post-Lament phenomena leave behind that do the most harm. Firstly, it's the waveform phenomena after the Lament that causes tacit discord outbreaks, causing these monsters to emerge from nowhere and wreak havoc upon the world. The phenomena also leaves behind tacit fields all over the world, creating a link to the etheric sea and causing more and more tacit discords to flood the world, and the mineral tacitites to infest Solaris 3. Oddly enough, each region of Solaris 3 that we have explored so far seems to also have its own unique waveform phenomena left behind after the Lament, influenced by its Threnodion, the godlike creatures born from the Laments that wreak havoc upon humanity. For instance, The most famous unique waveform phenomena for now is probably Renesita's dark tide. This dark and swirling mass of clouds will pour down an evil kind of torrent, spawning a new tacet field and a bunch of tacet discords. It was also capable of corrupting people to follow the will of the Threnodian Leviathan, converting living matter into a corrupted version of itself, and was also meant to bring about the end of Renesita, were it not for the Raganaceae, the Septimonians, and a roving hero. So, the Lament serves so many more purposes than just world building to give an excuse for all the ruined cities and cool monster designs. It's basically become the main driving force of the story, as the Rover's main goal hasn't really been to figure out their past for a while, especially after stories like IMEFs or Prolovas, but to help the people of Solaris 3 fight off the Threnodians left behind by the Lament and the waveform phenomena, with Rover and their people also being instrumental into bringing these Sentinels to Solaris 3. Furthermore, it's also used as the main vessel to tell the backstory of Rover and many other characters of the game, with all of them being resonators, which are intrinsically linked to the Remnant energy which also powers the Lament. So the apocalypse in Wuthering Waves is both quite important to the lore of the game and has really become the driving force of its current story.
Behind us, the broken bridge crumbled. Every famine and mass casualty risked dooming our civilization.
At first, it doesn't really seem like Arknights Enfield has a real apocalyptic event. While we are constantly dealing with Agaloy, their anchors, and our main villains, it's more of a regularly occurring struggle against nature and an inherently evil faction than the real end of days. Like, overall, Talos 2 seems to be doing alright. Multiple factions and civilizations now call the moon home, and the quality of life is constantly improving with the help of the civilization band and their cooperation. But that wasn't always the case, of course. One of the central events in Talosian history that has been mentioned multiple times in the story so far is the so-called First Agaloy War. This, to me, is the apocalypse which puts Talos 2 and Enfield Industries on the path that it walks on now. But first, we must, of course, quickly set the stage. Talos 2 was originally a new world that was colonized by the people of Terra, the setting of the original Arknights, where they used cosmic gates found on Terra's polar regions to get to this new world about 152 years ago. For 5 years, the colonists and the people still on Terra used this vital passage between the two worlds to set up the first cities of Talos 2. But in year 5 of the Talosian calendar, everything changed. The First Agaloy War was fought between the colonists of Talos 2 and, well, you know, the Agaloy, between year 5 and year 15. This war basically caused everything to go wrong. In the first few hours of the conflict, the Agaloy took over the Cosmic Gate on Talos 2's northern pole, destroying Talos 2's first settlement and forcing the humans to flee southward for the next 6 years of basically bitter conflict against this unstoppable horde. Only in year 11 of the Talosian calendar did humanity gain the initiative, when the administrator of Enfield Industries, you know, the same one we play as, rallied the human factions into driving back the Agaloy from the south side of Talos 2. In year 15, most, if not all, major military operations against the Agaloy in the south were halted, and by year 17 the Civilization Band was established to rebuild humanity. But this means that the link between Talos 2 and Terra was severed, and still remains that way to this day. The north of Talos 2 remains under control of the Agaloy, thanks to the emergence of the mysterious Aurora of Talos 2, which we see from space on the Dijon. The Talosians are now alone, cut off from Terra, which might not even exist anymore if the Agaloy invaded it, and were forced to rely on themselves for the next 150 years or so. What I find so fascinating about the First Agaloy War, which realistically should have spelled the end of days for all the humans on Talos 2, is how much it both builds and also instantly destroys the link to the original Arknights. Ever since Enfield was announced, I was dying to figure out how the game would link back to the original game. Connecting it directly to the cosmic gates from Arknights and then basically blowing them up is a good way to make lore connections whilst also keeping the game separate. Furthermore, because Enfield uses its own calendar with the Telosian one, we still don't know how many years into the future it actually is from the first Arknights. Well, we know that Warfarin is alive and leading the Rhodes Island contingent on Talos too, so that's something, I guess. This apocalyptic war is also really effective in establishing the still uncertain and on-edge life that the humans on Talos 2 live, which gives the power of organizations like the UWST and Enfield Industries a whole new meaning, as it makes kinda sense that all big organizations would band together to put up a front against the Agaloy, and also why there is such a big focus on industrialization and automation in Arknights Enfield. Like, there's no real huge nation filled with workers to call upon, as it seems most of the planet is still kinda uninhabited by humans, due to the Agaloy and the scars the wars left behind. The entirety of Talos 2's human population seems to be made for one purpose: to fight the Agaloy, regain what was lost, and possibly see what happened to their ancestral home all those years ago. Are you enjoying the video so far? Consider doing all the silly YouTube things like, leaving a like, giving your thoughts in the comments about different apocalypses in Gacha games, or subscribing if you haven't yet. And if you really like what I'm doing, consider becoming a member for as little as €2 or your regional equivalent per month to get your name featured at the end of every video. Right, let's get back into it.
An all-devouring disaster with chaotic space, monsters, and etheric matter.
The world of Zenless Zone Zero is actually a lot darker and more apocalyptic than you'd expect at first glance. I would know because I made an entire video about it that you should totally watch for some further insight into this. But for this video I wanted to focus on the pivotal apocalyptic events in the lore of Zenless, the expansion of Hollow Zero and the subsequent fall of the old capital. Now, the Hollows themselves are already terrifying enough on their own, as they are reality-shifting pocket dimensions that corrupt and change anything that's trapped inside them, both organic and inorganic. They are inhabited by disturbing and evil creatures known as ethereals, and most of the planet, and probably even the moon in Zenless Zone Zero, is covered in them, rendering life almost impossible except for a few pockets like the city of Eridu and its surrounding areas. 10 years before the events of the game, the Hollows brought the apocalypse to the city of Eridu, the last bastion of human society. As Hollow Zero expanded rapidly and at an unprecedented speed, it swallowed up a large part of the city of Eridu, killing untold thousands and crippling the remaining government, military and industry. The city was left either inside the now huge Hollow Zero or ruins right next to it. And to make it even worse, to stop the expansion of Hollow Zero, the government of Eridu had to resort to essentially nuking part of the city, causing a large chasm that split the remains of the city from Hollow Zero. The survivors eventually founded New Eridu, in the ever-present shadow of Hollow Zero and its continuously appearing minor hollows, just waiting for the apocalypse to knock on the door again. This event, which occurred 10 years before we even met Bell and Wise, is still the main driving force in the main story, and a large part of the character stories in Zenless Zone Zero. Bell and Wise's teacher was presumably false, blamed for the event, and their main goal is still figuring out the truth. This way, this apocalyptic event, which influenced literally everyone, is still the reason for them to keep going. Furthermore, literally every character we meet in Zenless has been affected by the event, from the soldiers and orphans to the businessmen and even those corrupted by the Exaltists. Even the name of the city, New Eridu, shows that the scars the fall of Eridu left are still the most prominent event in everyone's lives, with the fear of a return of this end of days being on everyone's mind, even as we explore Hollow Zero's ruined streets to find the truth.
Osmanthus wine tastes the same as I remember. But where are those who share the memory?
Genshin Impact's lore and world building has really matured over the last 5 or so years. Oh my god, Genshin is that old. Most notably in its depiction of the apocalyptic events that formed the version of Teyvat we now inhabit, the Archon War and the fall of Conria. Now, we actually know very little about the actual events of the Archon War, which was waged thousands of years ago and established the 7 Archons of Teyvat as we know them now. All we know for sure is that beforehand, Teyvat knew many more gods that generally lived in peace. They all had their own territory and wanted to help humanity prosper. But for some reason, which is undoubtedly linked to Celestia and the heavenly principles, the many gods started going to war against each other. Many fought to the death, whilst others tried to defend what they already had or save as many humans as they could from the massive destruction. Almost every modern nation of Teyvat can link its origins back to the events of the Archon War, with Mondstadt and Liyue in particular. We also don't really know how destructive the war actually was, due to the lack of information, but regions like Liyue's Gujin Stone Forest, which is made up of stone lances that the Archon Morax fought with, give us a good idea of how much of an apocalyptic war this seemed to be for the normal humans living amongst literal gods. We also don't really know the logistics of this huge conflict. Like, were human armies also involved, or was this just the gods slugging it out using their immense power to try and destroy their physical form or the people following them? There are still many unknowns surrounding the Archon War that I do hope we learn more about, as the scars that it left on Teyvat, its people and its gods cannot be understated. By contrast, the fall of Conria, also often referred to as the Cataclysm, is something we know way more terrible details about. Like, everything is still kinda super vague, as it is one of the main overarching plots in Genshin Impact, but we know enough to see how devastating this apocalyptic event was, and how important it is for the story, even though it was 500 years ago. Conria was the only nation on Teyvat which was not controlled by a god, and was basically in active rebellion against the Archons, Celestia and the heavenly principles, which they believed were not destined to be the true rulers of Teyvat, causing the, expected animosity between the two sides of the same coin. Unfortunately, to further their goals, the rulers of Conria did some pretty weird things, like use a special form of alchemy to create life itself, and trying to control and abuse the power of the otherworldly abyss in their struggle against the gods of Teyvat, with the help of even the Traveler's sibling. And it is these things, probably among many other sins, and the sudden emergence of abyss monsters from Conria that began what is now known as the Cataclysm. The abyss and their monsters attacked almost every nation in Teyvat, causing widespread destruction and death as these otherworldly beings swept across the land. The 7 Archons and their human followers did everything they could to fight against this tide, but the heavenly principles and the 7 knew that this disaster could only be stopped at its source. Thus, the wrath of the gods fell upon Conria at long last and basically wiped the entire country off the face of the planet. The nation with no gods was no more. The abyss had also planted bigger roots in Teyvat, and all surviving Conrians were cursed with either immortality or turned into hilichurls. Yes, the most common enemy are survivors of a deadly apocalypse 500 years ago, you're welcome. What makes the 2 different kinds of apocalyptic events in Genshin Impact stand out is how mythical they are. Especially the Archon War is talked about like it was a completely different era, which, I mean, I guess it kinda was, but without any real signs left over in the real world. Like we all moved on. But in the meantime, every nation can find some kind of history relating to this huge conflict, and it's one of the founding events when it comes to the lore of the establishments of the 7 and Celestia and everything around that. But the Cataclysm takes this to a whole new level, as it's almost talked about like a cautionary tale, don't upset the standing order in Teyvat or this might happen again. The Cataclysm has also taken up a huge role in the main story, starting from our first encounter of Dainsleif, and kinda taking center stage for most of Nordkreis's story. We've learned so much in tiny bite-sized pieces that only makes us more and more curious about why the Archons did this to mostly innocent people. There's also, of course, the very deep personal connection that the Traveler has with this Cataclysm, as their siblings has ties to both Conria and the Abyss, which is also why it slowly become our main goal as opposed to just, meeting every Archon of each nation to learn more about a sibling, which was kind of the overarching goal at the start of the story and kind of switched around, around Sumeru maybe. Conria and its fall still has lasting impacts on Teyvat, and also caused most of the current Archons to distrust Celestia and the Heavenly Principles. It's basically the kickoff point of this story. When looking at these 4 games and their respective apocalyptic events or massive disasters, there's, quite a few things that they have in common. But I think the most important commonality is how every single one of these is linked to the main character. Rover's past with the society that brought the Sentinels to Solaris 3, the administrator's role in the First Agaloi War, Bell and Wise's teacher being maybe responsible for the fall of Eridu, and the Traveler's sibling being so linked to the Cataclysm. These devastating events leave scars upon their respective worlds that leave so many unanswered questions that become one of the main driving forces in the story that these games tell. That's probably why we're all so invested in learning about it. These events build both the world we inhabit and the people we meet and the person we play as. To know such traumatic and world-ending events happened or are the norm puts into perspective how different these worlds are from our own. I think that's why Gacha games, and these 4 in particular, have such a fondness for the apocalypse. They serve not just a visual function, but are also a huge part of the world building and character building. These worlds would just not be the same without it. But what are your thoughts about how these games use such devastating events for their world building and main story? And are there any games that I should cover that have, very dangerously apocalyptic backstories like these? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing or even joining the channel, as I post regular deep dives and reviews into the games that I love.